Hi, everyone. Well, I have the unenviable task of keeping you awake after lunch. I'm going to try my best. I also can't really see you because it's very bright up here, but I trust you're out there. So thank you for choosing our track to be part of here. So I'm going to be speaking to us about how data is useful, but how art actually can help us engage audiences in data and in fact. And I will be covering the following kind of topics. I'll walk us through how we as scientists tend to communicate, and then try to convince you that there are other ways to do so. It's not maybe the most effective way depending on the audiences that you're working with. And I will give you some examples of how combining art with science, in this particular case I'll be talking about fine arts, visual arts, can help. But first, a little bit about me. So, fairly normal childhood. I was raised in a house filled with music. My mother is a classical pianist. My father is a piano technician. I grew up in northern Italy. But I had this idea that creativity shouldn't be structured, and I had horrible discipline when it came to actually, learning to be an artist and a musician. We moved to the United States. I got my bachelor's in art history and history here at UCLA. And then I started working at the Getty Museum, where I met my husband. And then I spent almost 2 decades in the environmental nonprofit sector. I really was motivated by the idea that I wanted to help both people and the planet. And apparently I couldn't get enough of UCLA because I came back for my master's in urban planning during my time at the nonprofit. And for me, creating, whether it was music, I'm a musician as well, or art, was really, I still had this idea, it shouldn't be structured, I shouldn't force myself to do it. It's just a nights and weekends activity. And that's unfortunate, but I changed my mind eventually. But in the meantime, I once again decided to come back to UCLA, got my PhD just a few years ago. And now I get to be in a position here at UCLA. I work at the Luskin Center for Innovation up in North Campus, but I work as a cooperative extension specialist. Every land-grant university in the country has a cooperative extension, and that really is the public service arm of the university. It's meant to make sure that research actually changes lives and changes conditions for the better. So now I legitimately can combine my love of art and science, and I'll tell you a bit about that. I'm going to tell the story through one area that I work in, and that is extreme heat. So the perceptions of Los Angeles, when you talk to folks who aren't from LA, who's visiting from out of town? Anyone? Is everyone from LA? Okay, we've got someone. Where are you visiting from? Madrid, wow, okay. Yeah, you know about heat. So the perception out there, oftentimes, Los Angeles is cars, palm-lined boulevards, and the beach, right? That's the perception out there. Well, here's the reality. If you happen to be one of these people, if you happen to be unhoused, or if you happen to not have the ability to pay for air conditioning or have access to it, or if you're an outdoor worker, it's very different now. So it's the idyllic climate is not so idyllic anymore. And this issue has been getting more attention. This is National Geographic about 5 years ago. This is Vermont Avenue from... let's see, look at that fun thing. So this is in the northern part of Vermont Avenue, all the way down, so that's like Los Feliz near Griffith Park, all the way down a few miles to South LA. And you can tell there's not a whole lot of shade as you move down south, and that's a problem because you're going to have more heat exposure. So, okay, that's the issue I want to talk to you about. But here's how scientists might communicate. So we're going to throw a bunch of different factoids at you, right? Heat is the biggest weather-related killer. It's underreported. Heat waves are getting longer. They're more frequent. They're more intense. And some LA neighborhoods will spend 2 to 3 additional months in the year in extreme heat. Of course, we're going to have lots of references for you because we're scientists. We might also tell you about some of the projects we did to really bring this to life. So here's a student project from a few years ago. We had students go and characterize the pedestrian experience in different neighborhoods of extreme heat based on land cover and land use. So in the shade, 75 degrees, surface temperature, not so much if you're in the sun, right? And we'll tell you about more of our research. We'll tell you, oh, look, we had this, during the pandemic, we had a network, a community network of sensors out in Southeast Los Angeles. We captured the hottest day ever recorded in Los Angeles, 121 degrees. Sorry to our Madrid friend, I don't have the Celsius equivalent here, but, and indoors we captured a temperature of 107 degrees. You could be an Olympic athlete, but exposure to that is not going to be something that is sustainable for almost anybody. And because we're scientists, oftentimes we want to try to do something about it, so we'll tell you about what we're trying to do about it, not just study it, but actually solve it in some way. So we founded a collaborative, Los Angeles Urban Cooling Collaborative, very interdisciplinary. We had folks from the medical field, people from psychology and anthropology and climate scientists. And we took the approach of thinking of LA as a patient. LA is running a fever. What do we do to reduce our patient's fever? Well, we used empirical data, both public health and weather data, historical data. Specifically, we looked at ER visits and deaths during heat waves, and then we tested a few prescriptions. So if we gave our patient some prescriptions, how would they respond, and would we be able to reduce that fever? So our prescription included tree canopy, and it included albedo, so solar reflectance of various pavements, walls, roofs. And then we tied that to public health protections. And because we're scientists, we'll tell you more about how we did this. So we'll show you, well, we tried different types of scenarios with different combinations of more of this prescription or less of that. So think of it as a dosage of sorts. And then, because we're scientists, we love to show you that the modeling looks very convincing, right? So we'll show you what it actually spits out. So in this particular case, we tested one of the prescriptions. It was low tree canopy cover and higher solar reflectance. This is 3 timestamps, and we see more blue means more cooling. But we also see a little bit of red there at the bottom, and that means we've probably displaced some heat from one neighborhood to another. So scientists, we like to be also very honest about the fact that it's not always perfect, and this is why we're doing the science. We'll show you some more kind of outcomes, and we'll tell you, this actually is quite promising. We think that there's a reason why it makes sense to actually translate this into policy. We could reduce extreme heat in these particular areas to the point where we could reduce mortality quite significantly. And we'll tell you that we also did this for ER visits, and we saw some really promising results there too. Depending on how committed we are to actually modifying land cover, we could reduce ER visits considerably. As you can see, is up to 66%, but it really depends on the type of heat wave and so on. And if we're good scientists, hopefully we also make it a little bit more digestible by giving you, pretty easy to digest summaries. So in this particular case, temperature reductions were great. Again, with that kind of patient analogy, it's 1 to 2 degrees centigrade, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually a life or death difference. 25 to 50% reductions in both ER visits and deaths were quite possible with various of the scenarios, which means actually saving dozens of lives, potentially, in the worst heat waves. And we'll tie it to some other things. So that's kind of the scientific approach, right? And I think you can probably all hang with that, because this is what you usually do, many of you. But we don't represent the entire world here, right? So hopefully we can actually engage with audiences that maybe wouldn't attend this kind of a gathering. So I'm going to argue that sticking to this approach is limiting, because it limits our audience. So a little bit about where we are right now. We know that a vast majority of people receive an outsized amount of their daily interactions and their information online, right? And people are generating information from all corners of the internet, and there has really never been as much access to information, whether it's credible or not, right? So we have more access to information, but that does not necessarily lead to more knowledge. It does not necessarily lead ultimately to what I'm hoping to do, which is actually changed behavior in people, right? So what do we do about that? Well, I think art and science actually are an antidote to that predicament where there's more information than ever, but actually not really an ability to be smarter, wiser, and more sort of effective in the way that we live in this world, in this ever more complicated world. Some of you may be familiar with Aristotle's artistic proofs, the idea being, in order to have a compelling and effective argument, you need three ingredients. You need the fact-based part, which he called logos. You need the emotional part, which is pathos. And you need the, well, this is why you should do it part, the ethical, the kind of moral part of it. So that, for him, was what constituted an effective argument. Well, if you think about it from the frame of science and art and marrying those two, logos is really the science part, right? So that's the fact-based approach. And art can really be the entry to that more emotional side of things, right? And for me, the way I look at it, art, we don't just make it for ourselves, we make it for people to view or listen to. And so it's really that participant that has the choice to then decide how they act, what is the right thing to do at this point now that I have this information and have been moved. So, how combining art with science can help. I'm going to argue that instead of going logos, pathos, and then ethos, we should really be going pathos first. So heart-first engagement can resonate. It can open people up. And that doesn't mean you can't engage them with facts too. It's just, in the work that I've been doing the last few years, it really seems to be more effective to be opening people up, kind of disarming them first, engaging them, and then engaging with the facts as well. And ultimately, that enables them to decide how to respond and whether to adopt this approach or not that you're pushing. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how I've now been able to do some of this work. So I've been curating exhibitions for the last few years. And this is an example of one that looked at the topic of extreme heat and shade equity. This was partnered with a local nonprofit organization in the arts in Highland Park in Northeast LA. And what we did is we had about 18 artists. Each of them got an umbrella or two umbrellas. That was their canvas. And we really asked them to respond to the topic of extreme heat. What do you see in this? How are you experiencing it? So here's an example at the bottom here. Diana Coney, she had the brilliant idea of on the outside of the umbrella, which is what gets hit by the sun, showing who is impacted by extreme heat. So it's the elderly and people who have pre-existing conditions and so on. And at the bottom, which is the shaded part, she showed here are some of the causes for extreme heat, why there's an inequity in this experience. And so that includes, jet travel and all of the online purchases that we have and eating meat and, commercialism and so on. This is what it looked like. It was attractive enough for the LA Times to come out. And it's really about letting people have an excuse to come enjoy being with each other, and then really engaging them with the topics. We also partnered with an organization called The Nature of Cities, which is New York City based, and they digitized this whole experience. And we had the opportunity to ask scientists, poets, artists, planners to respond to some of the umbrellas that the artists created. And so we coupled that, and that was either written or in audio. So just a way to kind of expand upon this and make it more widely accessible. We always like to couple all of this with ways to further engage. So panel discussions are a great way to do that. So you've gotten people in through that heart-first interaction, right? They're just taking in something visual or auditory or whatever. And then let's actually invite people to talk about some of the issues. And so here's an example of a panel that we had actually on this topic: how do art and science intersect? And we have a variety of different kinds of interactive activities, which I'll touch upon. So that was the first exhibition that we had, kind of an outdoor installation. on this topic. And it went so well that we were able to have it in a much kind of bigger form on this topic at Descanso Gardens. So Descanso Gardens is an LA County-owned facility in the northeast sort of part of LA County in La Cañada Flint Ridge. It's a lovely botanic garden and outdoor museum. And they also have indoor spaces for art. So last year, between July and October, we had this exhibition. Again, LA Times really liked it. We got a very nice write-up there. And all in all, we had about 300,000 people that visited Descanso Gardens during that period, with varying degrees of interaction with the work, but certainly it was quite successful. We kind of took over the gardens. So we had installations throughout the outdoors, and then we had a very carefully curated journey, particularly the indoor parts, the galleries themselves, where we walked people through the kind of the past, present, and future of shade equity. Why is it a difficult topic to, why does it exist? Why is it a difficult topic to overcome? And what might a future look like where we have more green and equitable access to shade? And again, you've already heard about this, but engagement in some other way, right? So we've got the art. That's not an entry point. But now what, right? How else can we really explore the topic and enable people to choose their own adventure? So we had, in this particular case, this is from sort of a festival day that we had, kind of a family festival. We had things like a thermal photo booth. People could have their photo taken and see how the heat signature of different surfaces sort of appears. It was fun to ask people, are you hot? Are you cool? Are you hot or not? At the bottom left, we had a heat scavenger hunt with temperature guns. We had tree adoption, so people could actually go home and start being part of the solution by planting a tree. And we had a panel discussion. We also were able to invite various entities to join us. We're not the only ones who are working on this topic. So over on the left there is the LA County Chief Sustainability Office engaging people on priorities for the heat action plan, which later came out and was approved this year. And we had kind of more pensive activities as well that people could engage in on their own. So we had an activity room with a few things. So this is like a postcard that is blank except for a line drawing of a woman waiting for the bus with no shade. So the prompt was, how would you help Iris wait for the shade? Her name was Iris. So we had about 6,000 people that participated in this. We also had on the back side an opportunity for people to write kind of a little postcard message, which we had prompts that were specific to it. And this is an example of how we can take, we can infuse artistic offerings with science. So it can kind of science and policy-based art exhibition. But then we can engage people and we can turn it back into science, right? So this is, I'm working with a student team here, undergraduate student team that has been painstakingly documenting exactly what came out of this postcard activity. And out of 1,900 postcards, they found that overwhelmingly most of them were quite positive and joyous and had various emotions that were overall positive. About this topic of shade equity, which means people, typically, you don't know if people are cynical or not. Well, in this case, I would say, by and large, people feel like we can actually still do something about it. But we also learned that there were some more negative types of emotions associated with some of this. This is kind of the themes that came out. So it's just another example of how we can take this kind of engagement data and turn it back into science. Funders love this kind of stuff. And, we can make reports out of it. So however you want to do it, it's useful in some way. So caring, kindness, and trees and nature were some of the prevalent themes that emerged through this. We also had almost like a survey activity. So we had these posters with a few questions, including whether people felt that they have sufficient shade or trees in their neighborhood to walk around safely on a hot day. And then we had a series of facts, shade facts. And so people could just take a sticker and very quickly say, oh, that's the most surprising shade fact for me. And in this particular case, the yellow bar is the most surprising fact for people was school playground surfaces often get hot enough to cause second-degree burns. So people found that to be quite surprising. And this was about 3,700 people that voted. One more quick example. So that was all about extreme heat and shade equity. Well, we also have done a few exhibitions on other topics. And here's one that we did in 2024. It was a traveling exhibit on the topic of water. So a few of the topics that are themes within that affect Southern California communities. So artists received a wood panel. It had a spigot attached into it, like physically attached into it, and they received a prompt about one of a few different topics, including tap trust, whether people trust their tap water, the human right to water, which is kind of the idea that we should all have affordable, safe, clean access to water, which California has enshrined into law, imported water, etc. So again, just a very quick show of like how we engaged people after they go through the exhibition, if they want to interact in additional ways. We asked various prompts about their relationship to water, the types of questions that they have. And overwhelmingly, we saw it was positive, but we also had some negative responses. So some people we found had worries about, is it safe to drink my water from the tap? Will we have water if the drought continues, et cetera? So we were able to, this is kind of a general analysis, but we were able to also go deeper with some additional analyses. And this was probably my favorite part. So blind water tasting. So we had people, if you've ever done like a wine tasting, this was kind of like that. So we had people try 4 different types of water. We had LADWP tap, Evian, Dasani, and Arrowhead. And they would write down what texture are you noticing? What tastes are you noticing? Is it sweet? Is it acidic? And then they would rank the 4. They would say, number 3 was my favorite one, etc. And then we ask them to guess which brand is which. I can tell you people have very strong opinions about this. They'll come in and say, I never drink tap. Or they say, I only drink tap. I hate Dasani. I love Evian, whatever it is, right? And almost nobody can actually guess accurately. So we had a 32% accuracy in actually having anybody guess any of the 4 correctly. Dasani, oddly, was the most. I guess it's maybe a more distinct taste. It's a little more minerally. But essentially everybody who walked through, except for a couple of people who I learned super tasters. Some people have like extremely refined palates. Mostly they didn't know. So that's an experiential thing that people go through and hopefully walk away with going, I actually didn't expect tap water to taste so good. And the favorite ones, when the blind tasting, when we put them all together, after hundreds of people went through this, were Dasani and LADWP tap. Now, Dasani is actually bottled municipal water, so it's actually both of the top 2 were tap water, which is interesting. Evian came in last. Yeah, even though it's the most expensive. So, if this strikes a chord with you and you're interested in potentially trying something of this sort, I would encourage you to go out there and find other examples of this. I am certainly not the only one who's interested in this intersection. There are many examples of such collaborations. I was delighted to find out that the American Geophysical Union actually has an art and science community. And last year when the conference was in New Orleans, I got to attend a session Do you all know the musician Jewel? So from 90s and 2000s. She had this idea, and she reached out to NASA via Instagram and said, hey, I want to make an instrument that allows the ocean to have a voice. Okay. So she worked with NASA, created a sculpture that takes real-time data from the ocean about wave depth and temperature and all sorts of data points, and it's a dynamic sculpture. So that was really cool. And then once you get a little more inspired, you can be the bridge, right? So connect with the arts near you. This can be in any number of different ways. And it's not just the visual arts, right? We're going to hear from a music perspective in a little bit. But look around, nonprofit organizations that work in the arts, lots of colleges and universities, and even high schools and middle schools are hungry for collaborations and are waiting to do something that feels like it has meaning and the potential to make some change in the world. And then get out there and pitch an idea, just like Jewel, Of course, it helps if you have a name like hers, but, just come up with a crazy idea, and maybe you'll find someone that says, you know what, let's do that. And there's a real opportunity to have artists and musicians elevate your science by virtue of interpreting it in ways that feel more open and more interesting. And that's all I had for you. So thank you very much for your time. I think we have a couple of minutes for questions.
So when you were building these solutions for the community, did it feel like these were outsiders who were building something for the community, or did it feel like the community was participating in the building? And is that distinction important?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, when we're doing these types of curations, it's very much about finding people that can interpret what's happening in their neighborhood. So we work primarily with folks who have that local connection. And for me, that's more credible. It's also going to mean that we're going to receive a product from them. They're going to go through a process that I think means more to them because they already have that connection. So, but you could also so with the example of that first one that we did, and then we worked with the organization, The Nature of Cities, to digitize, the whole exhibition, and then have. We had a variety of people from throughout the world respond to the art. So that was really fun, too, to see how a very local set of creations then spurs reactions from people from pretty much every continent that has, a different take on it. Thanks for the question. Anything else? Any other questions? Comments? Compliments are good too. I mean, we take those. I think we have one here.
Yeah, I loved that. And I'm curious, as you're partnering with musicians and artists, I'm currently exploring some jeweler aspects, and just curious how you collaborate in an ethical manner, give them rights to their art and also kind of maintain your own IP. That's kind of the what I'm straddling at the moment. I'm curious if you've come up against that.
Yeah, so I think of what we do as creating this space for them to create, right? So it's more like I provide the canvas, but what happens after that is I do want to be able to communicate to audiences in a way that I buy it and I understand it, so that's why we're very oriented toward here's the topic, here are prompts that we want you to respond to. And oftentimes, art calls are not that prescriptive, that'll be more thematic. But for me, because I have the purpose of extending knowledge that is specific to research or policy, that doesn't really work for me, right? But then once they create it, I mean, one of the ways to kind of promote equity is first of all, pay your artists, I mean, artists are so used to being exploited, would you like to donate for this cause? And it's I mean, other countries don't take that approach. Other countries actually understand that the arts actually are essential for the artists are the myth makers of the day, and they can really understand how to interpret where we are in space and time. So in the instances that I showed you, we always had a stipend, and artists can, if they want to be able to sell that work, great. They set the prices. They get the majority of that. Some of it goes to the nonprofit that will be hosting. But yeah, the idea is you really want to create something that isn't exploiting them, but is honoring the fact that they're doing something meaningful and contributing. Great question. All right, well, I think I'm just over time here, so thank you again for your attention, and have a good rest of the afternoon.